Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the Ask the Once and Future Nerd for Book 2, Chapter 6. Um, we
Hello.
we are live here. I'm Zach. I'm here with Gregory M. Schultz. Hey Greg, how's it going?
It's going well. Hi,
And
Zach.
hello. And with Christian T. Kelly Madera. Christian, how are you doing?
I am doing good. I jumped the gun on my intro, but I'm good now. Here now. How?
Oh, you got cut for a second. Are you still here?
I'm still here. Can
Oh, great.
everybody hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Hello everyone in the chat as well. If there's any issues with the sound or video, just let us know in the chat and we'll try to fix it. So, welcome to the Ask the Once and Future Nerd, as I said, for Book 2, Chapter 6. If for some reason this is your first time joining us at the Once and Future Nerd, hello and welcome, but please don't start with this episode. It will be full of lots of spoilers for our recent chapter. So you can go back, listen to the chapter, and then come back and join us. Um, that being said, we will be discussing Chapter 6, and we got a ton of great questions from all of the social medias. So if anyone would like to participate in the next one, you could find us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Reddit, on Discord. I think we have questions from all of these places this time, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So,
If we get really good questions in the YouTube chat, we sometimes stop and do those.
yeah. But diving right in, we're going to talk about Chapter 6, and one of the main plots of Chapter 6 was a heist involving Nia's parents. So Nia's parents were held hostage, and then mostly Nia came up with a scheme to save them, and um, the results, there were some pretty big costs associated with that. So the first question we wanted to talk about, Kat on Tumblr, who I believe is in the chat as well. Um, hey Kat, asked, your recent chapter has a lot of emphasis on the themes of innocent bystanders and protesters being hurt. Do you know how you plan to continue to expand on that in the future? And I think this is a pretty important question, especially um, seeing some of the things going on in the world recently. I think it's a good thing to discuss. Does anyone, just Christian, do you have some thoughts about this?
Yeah. I mean, we I think this was kind of one of those things sometimes, and this may make me sound stupid, but sometimes there are things you forget about what would be going on in a scene when you're first writing it for audio. If that, like, I'm not always picturing the whole scene in my head when I'm writing it. I'm picturing how it'll sound, but I will sometimes forget to picture how it looks. And then once I start to go back and really think about how the sound effects are going to work, then I'm thinking of, everything that's going on in that scene and what is in that environment. Um, and so I kind of always knew, like, it was part of the original idea for the scene, that these gangsters who are kind of like set up essentially by Nia, that they were going to get shot, which in some ways is bad enough, especially for Nia, who wouldn't want to cause any more death than is absolutely necessary. But then it dawned on me later that, like, no, there's a crowd there too, and if this is just kind of like a flurry of shooting, other people are going to get hurt. And once we had kind of written ourselves into that, it was, I mean, yeah, that's kind of upsettingly real, if you live in the United States. So it was then just trying to figure out how to handle that with the appropriate sensitivity and care, because I think it was fitting with our world and with our moment, to have, and to place the blame squarely in the lap of the elves, who did not need to respond by just starting to shoot everything, but also give that moment the moral weight that it deserves. I
Mm-hmm.
guess I'm not sure if that answers the question entirely, but I guess more broadly, I think it's gonna continue to be important. Like, as the stakes get higher and as our characters try and do more and more, it's gonna be important for them to think about how their actions are affecting everyone around.
Yeah. Uh,
Zach, I don't know, as how did because you saw that scene kind of as it was being developed a little bit from from the not from the outside, but watching me write it and realize that's where we were going. I don't know how if you want to react to that.
yeah. So to be totally honest, while this scene was in progress, I feared it a little bit. Like, I agree. I think it was the thing that needed to happen in our world, but it's not something to take lightly. And I was a little concerned that we can pull it off the way we wanted to and make it clear that this is not like, some cavalier harming of innocence. That this is as sort of as tragic as it is was how were treating it. Chat points out that it was also in the Renault scene with uh, I guess with the Fisher people and the townsfolk as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
So, but yeah, I think that was my main take on this chapter in particular is it was something, and Christian mentioned things in the U.S. right now, but as well there's protesting in Hong Kong for the past
yeah.
3-4 months with they have millions of people protesting and lots of uh, unfortunately protesters getting hurt, and it's a scary time in the world, and I was a little nervous bringing it up in the show, but I think it was something we needed to do.
Yeah. And to talk about the Renault scene for a second, I mean the I think we talked about this from the first moment that we introduced Renault, of like the needle to thread with his stuff was always like, um how do you make him both you know treat him with the ridicule he deserves, while also not taking lightly the danger that he represents. And so for the scene with Renault, we thought we needed to show that there's a cost to the mayor of the town kind of coddling this terror that's been unleashed for the mayor's own uh, political end.
Yeah, Christian, you're a little bit choppy, but that's
I'm a little
okay.
bit choppy.
Um,
Okay.
Greg,
Not
do you
sure
have
what to
anything
do.
you'd like to add about this?
No, I thought it painted a good picture, or I don't know, kind of like held up the mirror in a lot of ways, to use a oft stated metaphor. But um, yeah, the I guess like the difference between the Renault scene versus um, the scene at the race, um, it just Renault, you almost kind of expect it from, versus, and um, you could kind of see how it was coming, and this Renault kind of like tripping into getting away with things quite regularly. But the racing scene was like, okay, but this is almost normal from the elves, but everyone like hates it but goes with it, and that one also I felt like struck more of a nerve. Um,
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely tonally different, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
yeah.
And I think part of that is the theme of innocence being hurt is something that we've had from the beginning. A lot of Regan's backstory is her sister getting hurt. A lot of, the whole chapter where Jen stabbed the dirty cop was the innocent children getting hurt. But this was the first time that innocence getting hurt was a result of the actions of our group rather than our group responding to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's certainly something that will reverberate for the characters moving forward. It's not like they're not thrilled with this, I'll say.
Yeah.
Moving forward to a slightly less depressing angle of this question, Kat also asked how we put together the action scenes, including the writing process, the recording process, the guidelines, and this scene was one of the most ambitious action scenes that we've put together. So
yeah, I think it's probably fair to say that it was the most, from an action standpoint, it was like hands down the most ambitious. I mean, we've never done 20 straight minutes of action before.
Right. So what are some behind the scenes you can share about that?
Well, I think we kind of wanted to have a heist in the previous chapter, or the plan was we did have a heist in the previous chapter when the kids go to the library. But the plan was always that would kind of be a practice run for a bigger heist, and we weren't entirely sure what that heist would look like, but once we realized that there was this situation with Nia's parents, that seemed like the obvious candidate, and so I kind of approached it. I really liked writing that scene because I kind of approached it as a writing challenge, because we don't usually, for an epic fantasy series, our action sequences are usually shorter, and we tend to focus a lot on the character work, which I think is where I'm most comfortable writing, oddly. So this was an excuse to write outside of my comfort zone and try something new. So there was a part of me that was just, all right, cool. How big can I make this? And shout out to, I mean, the performances are excellent across the board. But the power post team on episode, which was Brielle Achterhoff cut it, and Matt Boudreau did mixing and sound design, and they really knocked it out of there. We dumped like a huge new challenge in their lap, and I think they totally knocked it out of the park. So that was really it was really rewarding to try something a little new and intimidating and work out well, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. Greg, how was it acting in those scenes? You were doing the whole rock climbing thing, and it's a pretty physical scene. How was it from your chair?
It was, well, first off, I was standing. No, but,
I'm sorry, my mistake.
What?
It was interesting because you really, like, rather than getting into, I don't know, I felt like I was focusing more on macro than micro, if that makes sense, of like minutia of like going through a sentence to need to set the pace and like the set the scene for the whole kit and caboodle. And like even the climbing up that cliff, it had to be kind of a building thing, and then your grunts had to be slightly different than the other grunts, because when you're really getting like strained, then it has to be like but not just the of usual times. I feel like I leaned on a lot of orcs from like Warcraft 3, Warcraft 2 for inspiration. But no, it was it was definitely pretty cool, like to kind of understand the physicality and try to get that through just through vocal means was definitely different.
Something that I discovered when we were editing this scene is that like speaking voice, I think Greg, you and Garrett have very different and recognizable speaking voices. But when you're like straining and grunting, like your voices are quite similar, and so Matt and I had to kind of play with the panning and the equalization and stuff to make it clear because there's a key moment where Yellowwing makes the decision to save Brennan that is signified with like a big strain, and it's I just listening to it, it wasn't immediately obvious who was straining, so we had to make sure Yellowwing is always on this side of the sound field and Brennan is always on this side of the sound field, and they're EQ'd differently so that Brennan is further away.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Chad is pointing out whether this was a heist or a caper, which makes me very happy.
A lot of mileage out of a very dumb joke.
I really enjoy how much mileage we got about that joke, so I'm pleased with that. We also got a question from Fascia on Facebook, saying, "I love that someone there is into heist movies. What's everyone's favorite? Mine is National Treasure." So, I really liked the I was going to say the original, but I mean the recent original Ocean's 11 was one that I enjoyed. How about you all?
I like Ocean's 11. I think I still haven't seen the original Italian Job, so I enjoy the Mocky Mock remake.
Yeah, that one is actually pretty good.
I enjoyed that as well.
Definitely the idea of like stuff falling and being caught in improbable ways is like it's got the DNA of the early 2000s Italian Job in it. I really like I think The Sting is a really good heist movie, and I'm always trying to like whenever we do a heist, I like to have parts of it that are like social engineering in addition to action and like acrobatics and stuff. It's also something that I really like about the Liza Lamora by Scott Lynch, that like there's a huge social engineering aspect to the heist of just, you know, there's the sneaking and the fighting and all that, but there's also just plain old tricking people.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite books. I really enjoy Lies of Locke Lamora.
Yeah, it's really fun. If you like heists and you like fantasy stuff, which you probably do if you're listening to this stream, and you haven't read Lies of Locke Lamora, you should.
And very creative swears.
Yeah.
The one I will say that the heist film that I was most looking forward to and then stopped being looking forward to was Ant-Man as directed by Edgar Wright.
Oh, that would have been
that whole
good.
Thing. And then looking at what Edgar Wright did with Baby Driver.
Yeah.
Go like, what this could have been. But Baby Driver has some really great like heist sequences.
Yes, there's so much great stuff in Baby Driver. It's tough now because it has approximately 100% too much Kevin Spacey.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of good stuff in Baby Driver. I also just want to... Oh, sorry.
Go for it.
I want to give, in terms of like inspiration for the heist, I actually wanted to give a quick shout out to Herbie Hancock, because the like obviously the score that we did for that became its own thing, but the inspiration for that is very much Herbie Hancock's original recording of a Chameleon off of Headhunters, and I love the way that song is arranged because it like builds the way it just builds the parts, like first you have the synth bass, and then you have the drums, and then you have the real bass playing high on the neck, and then you have 4 different clav layers, and then the horns come in, and it kind of mixes and matches. And that was really my inspiration of doing the score in the heist section, of how to use the different parts of the arrangement to signify different locations within our heist scene. So if you haven't listened to the, I think it's like a 13-minute song or something, but it's very cool. You should check it out.
It's worth it. So, moving on from the heist subplot, one of the other major subplots going on in this chapter was we continue to learn more about First Snow and her community of people who the main characters would refer to as orcs, and we're really starting to build out their culture and their plot, which will, as you can imagine, become more relevant as we move forward. But we got a few questions on the orc culture. So we got a few similar questions, so I'm just going to combine them. But thank you to Kat and also to Sarosena on the Discord. They ask, what historical context are you drawing from for the relationship between the orcs and the elves? It sounds Native American, like the Native Americans. Were there any other case studies? And also, what can we tell about their way of life, their religion, and their relationship with magic? So what do we think about the orcs?
Well, this is something that we actually talked about a lot when we were starting to write these sections, and we worked with our sensitivity reader to kind of thread a needle, because I think what we were trying to do was we specifically did not want to draw any one-to-one parallels with a real Earth culture, because then you're in kind of a full-on allegory world that I think we would have gotten too far out in front of our skis on. And also because, you know, the quasi-European cultures that we started the show with are, you know, it's a mix, you know, Celtic stuff and Germanic stuff and what have you. But we also didn't want it to be so broad that it's just like, well, every non-European culture is the same. You know what I mean? Like, so you want the culture to be like realized and specific without being too one-to-one. And so I can say that First Snow's specific village is drawing many of its detail from the indigenous peoples of the Great Plains and Canadian prairies. But there are little bits of the American Southwest and also the Northeast, whereas the you know the Federation is kind of inspired by like the Iroquois Confederacy. So, but I will also say that like it's definitely not what's the word I'm looking for? Monolithic over the mountains. There are other cultures in this world that we haven't met that would be different, and yet at the same time there is a similarity to all of their different struggles, because they're all being threatened and or oppressed by the elves in similar ways, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And another part of that, which connects to their relationship with magic, another reason to not be too one-to-one parallel with any real world, I guess our world culture, is that we wanted the orcs to be very adept and powerful with magic, which, to the best of our knowledge, magic doesn't exist in our world.
Right.
But the so we wanted specifically to sort of shine a spotlight in the difference between, for all of book 1.5, the audience hears the point of view of the people of Jordan, thinking that all the orcs are backward savages, whatever, and it turns out that their power with magic is extremely more sophisticated than anything that's in the eastern side of the mountains, I suppose. So that was something we wanted to emphasize, is how strong their magic use is. And so that's why we were playing with the fun things like the megaphones and the telegraphs and all that sort of stuff.
And it's it's worth saying that in the way we've set up Jordan, magic is very scientific in its functioning. Like, knowledge of magic is not terribly different from knowledge of science in the way that this world works. And I think it's worth thinking about and pointing out, even though there's, to the best of our knowledge, no quote unquote magic in our world, that when Europe began colonizing, the scientific method was newish. Rationalism as a way of looking at the world was newish, but Europe was convinced that they had all the answers, and a lot of types of knowledge and knowing that were dismissed out of hand as backwards when encountered by Europeans, because they weren't arrived at, explicitly by the scientific method, turned out to be true in terms of understanding weather patterns and certain types of medicine and all like that. So I think it was worth kind of exploring ways of knowing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Greg, do you have anything any thoughts about First Snow's village or culture, anything to discuss?
I think it's fascinating to see the world building and get a chance to get a glimpse at stuff beyond the mountains. I didn't know a lot of that stuff that Christian just talked about, which was kind of cool to kind of get the primer on. It's like, oh, okay, this makes sense. It's, I don't know. It's I'm very excited for where it's going to go. I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't want to say anything.
Yeah, trying to avoid spoilers for the upcoming chapters, which we're in process on creating right now.
Yeah.
Chad has asked, what do First Snow's people call themselves? That's a very good question. I think we haven't told the audience that yet.
Yeah.
I think
we know that they call their village Three Bridges. As to how they refer to their culture, we've not delved into that, and I'm honestly not 100% sure what is the foundational unit of their identity, so to speak. Are they a member of their village first? Are they a member of some broader culture first? I don't think they're members of the Federation first, because I think that's a kind of loose organization, but or at least not an identity organization. But that's a really good question to explore going forward.
Mm-hmm. If anyone has anything else to add about that, otherwise we will move on a little bit.
I will say just an anecdote. a peek behind the curtain a little bit on recording at least my lines, was that it's weird to do a voice in a show that is more or less your voice, as Christian kept trying to get me to do stuff without adding any kind of affectation or accent, just because I wasn't used to doing that in a studio. And it's like, younger. Well, not that young. We'll just talk. It's like, I was like, but I gotta do a thing. I was like, is this even acting? But it was fun to do. Once I figured out what I was doing.
Did you feel like you found yourself, I guess, at some point, like found the voice that's your voice?
I think so. It was just like, all right, just relax and say and speak, into a weird sense, which was kind of cool to get to do that.
Cool.
It's great too because my dad is a patron, and
thanks, Greg's dad.
Thanks, Dad. So, in that first episode where I do the voice, I was like, oh, could you tell where I showed up? And he was like, oh no, I didn't hear it. And then he went back and he realized that because he was a patron and he was like busy for that week, he hadn't actually listened to it, but he read it in advance because of the script that he got. And there's like, oh, that's why I didn't hear it. I never listened to the episode. So that was fun. I was like, it's basic. It's just, I'm surprised you can't tell it's me, but okay. Cool.
That's pretty funny. I always think that Christian stands out the most when he does lines, which is maybe just because I've known Christian for so much longer than everyone else, but it always comes out to me as, oh, that's Christian doing that line.
Yeah, you're used to you guys talk a lot, so you hear each other. You're used to hearing him on your headphone.
Yeah, that's true. That must be it.
It's also like there's a few characters where I really thought about what they were that I play, that I really thought about what they should sound like before I started recording. But there's a whole lot of like guards and like, oh shit, I forgot to cast this character and I didn't schedule anyone to come in and record it. I guess it's did I lose everybody?
You cut out for a second, but I think you're back.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I think I got my point across. I show up in the studio, realize I forget to cast some. I didn't schedule anyone to come in to record them, and
yeah, it's pretty funny. Well, moving on to some not specifically plot related questions. First, I want to say there's been some really cool fan art on that have been posted to us on Twitter. So if anyone's interested in fan art, check out the Twitter feed. We usually retweet a bunch of it. We also got one of the most flattering and terrifying forms of fan appreciation I've ever seen, and I think Greg hasn't seen this, but someone named their actual human child baby Reagan, and this is like we're so honored and amazed. It's literally like there's no words. I'm kind of speechless about it. So that's the coolest thing that I've ever heard.
That's very cool.
Yeah. I know it's not like that. It feels like a responsibility that I'm absolutely not ready for. I know that it's not, but it's like, what if we screw up? Like, what if we do a bad job writing the character going forward?
I had the same thought. It's a big responsibility, I guess, but congratulations to baby Regan for entering the world, and
yeah, congratulations to Mom and Dad. Thank you, Dad, for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you for the very high honor, and Yeah.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
it's so cool. Um, moving on from that, which is a little difficult to do, we got a couple of questions from Joshua on Facebook and Night Brother on Reddit asking about sort of the full arc of the story, about how many books there are going to be and how much of it is planned out. They asked about the sort of the Sanderson style versus the George R.R. Martin style. Um, I would put us somewhere strongly in between those two things.
Yeah.
So we have planned for 4 books. And we know sort of the big broad strokes of what will happen in each of those 4 books, but we definitely do not have chapter by chapter, episode by episode for those yet.
Yeah.
We typically have the most detailed for, I'd say, 2 to 3 chapters in advance, and then we have these very long, involved writers' room meetings, which Greg can attest to. He's laughing right now, where we have these very deep and intense discussions and arguments about the up to the tiniest minutia of detail of what will be coming up next.
Yeah. Which is hilarious because it'll be like 30-minute conversation about like A or B, and then somebody will go both, and we're like, okay, yes, of course, this opens everything.
Yeah. Or neither, or we don't resolve it in the room.
Or we go back 4 steps and just forge a different path. Yeah. I think it's a lot of fun, but yeah.
It definitely is, and shout out to everyone who is involved in the writing process, by the way. Greg is one of our amazing writers. Shannon does a lot of the writer's room and the writing for us. Rhiannon as well. Ian. We've gotten a lot of feedback and comments that since we've expanded to this full writer's room, a lot of the writing has improved dramatically. So you all are awesome.
Yeah. I agree with that completely.
Yeah,
as
100%.
One of the main writers before, I completely agree that it is better now that we have more people.
100%. Chat points
we all
out.
set out the
go for it.
The path. So we're just trying to do you right.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The YouTube chat points out the devil's in the details, but that's where the fun stuff happens. It's true. 100% true.
Yeah.
Go for it, Christian.
I was just gonna say that, like, in terms of what do they call it, plotters versus pantsers or whatever, like whether you plot everything out or whether you fly by the seat of your pants or you see where it takes you. I love to have a general idea of where I'm going, and know what I'm working towards, because that often is part of what excites me about writing something, and it helps me narrow in on like what themes are gonna emerge. But I also think it's very important to like your characters should be psychologically realistic and consistent, at least, probably even a little more so than actual humans, because that's what makes stories understandable and easy to follow, and what hooks you into a character. So if we find if we're heading towards the outline and all of a sudden we get to the point, oh shoot, a character, like, we never want to have a character do something that we don't think they would do in that moment just to get where we're trying to get. And if we get to a situation where that is going to happen, we will either, if stuff that happened before is not already canon, we will go back and tweak it, or we'll live with the decision that character would realistically.
Yeah, and in case it wasn't obvious from this discussion, during these writing meetings, a lot of things change. Like, we're very, very open to and expecting these writers' rooms to change what's going to happen, sometimes very dramatically. So even if we have what we want to happen planned out, that doesn't mean it's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on from that, we had a couple of questions about Jen's cell phone. Mr. Mukhtar on Twitter asked if it will be a plot point again. We also got a comment on Twitter saying, sometimes my only motivation to remember to plug my phone in at night is the fear that I'll wake up in a medieval fantasy land with 8% battery remaining, which is very funny.
Yeah, and blamed us for that fear. That's Katie from Hug House, by the way. Shout out to Hug House, working on scoring magic and Valence right now. Very excited to see what happens with Valence. And thanks for blaming us for an irrational fear, Katie. I don't know what to do about that.
But so, will it be a plot point again? That's a good question. I think to some extent it has served its purpose a little bit in sort of being a point for Jen to start learning her abilities to manipulate electricity.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it will. It to some extent we've sort of it's achieved its purpose, and that may be enough with it. But I can't say that it will not come back again. Do you guys agree with this?
I mean, I would say there's only so much that we can do with it because, like, the phone works, but there's no 4G in Jordan, right? So there's there's only what's already on the phone, which is Jen's music collection, which in my mind is probably like partially the music that she was actually listening to and enjoying as a 16-year-old girl in 2014 or whenever they got transported. Part of it we know is her dad's music that he gave her. And part of it was probably the football, like the pep rally, like playlist that, I imagine that their high school football program was probably such that like someone just had to plug in an iPhone to the stadium PA for like the pep rallies and stuff, and it was probably so she's probably got a bunch of AC/DC and stuff on there for that reason. And I always thought that the cell phone had potential usefulness in the future if we ever wanted to incorporate our world music more into the show. However, we do not currently have incorporate our world music into the show money. So until we do, I'm not entirely sure what else we can do with the phone. But I always thought of that as like, that's our in if we ever wanted to put more music.
That is a good way to handle that.
Yeah. I mean, like we kind of pointed out about with the writer's room, all sorts of different stuff happens. So I'll leave my comment to share with the two of you after the call.
Very good.
That's a little ominous.
No, just maybe I have an idea.
You have an
maybe
idea?
It's a bad idea, but
oh, I'm excited to hear it. Ooh, the chat asks, what if the orc tech was so advanced that Jen's stuff could interface with it? That's a very cool question. Not going to confirm nor deny what may be in the plans for the future, but that's a very cool question.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We then have a bunch of the usual fun, silly questions to wrap up the end of the episode. The first question, also from Kat. Thanks, Kat, for stocking half of this episode's questions, but they're great questions. If a certain someone on this call who likes Bruce Springsteen were to choose a Bruce Springsteen song for each of the major characters, which would you choose and why?
Yeah, so I thought about this, and I then started to think that like me describing Bruce Springsteen songs is going to be just audio poison. So I think what I'm going to do, and thank you very much for this question, I think I'll make a Spotify playlist and I'll post it on our social media.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Email out the writer's room, see if other people have some input. But that's a fair concern for audio purposes. Um, in the YouTube chat, just to go back a second, I think this is also Kat. Mentions that Jen's got all the top 40 from 2014 on her phone, including Timber by Kesha, All About That Bass by Megan Trainor, and Shake It Off by Taylor Swift, and Let It Go.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
That's very accurate.
Yeah.
The next question we have, are any of you big Golden Compass fans?
I should be, but I'm not, unfortunately. I just never. Yeah.
That's fair. So, Sarosena on Discord asked about what daemons each of the characters would have. We may not have the best group to discuss this at the moment. I read some of Golden Compass when I was young, and then some more of it in college, and I don't know if I ever finished it up, unfortunately. But
yeah, it's a bummer that Ian is not. Ian would have been great for this.
Yeah, Ian would have been all over that. But if anyone listening has their own answers to this, please write in and tweet us, Facebook us, and tell us what you think. Then the next question: could Jen use her magic powers to bend elements, such as in Avatar: The Last Airbender? And if the other characters were in Avatar: The Last Airbender, who would be a bender and who would not be a bender, and what would be their elements? So, I think from the magic standpoint, bending elements would be difficult, but it's just a matter of momentum. So I bet water bending and air bending are pretty easily doable. Earth bending may be a little tough. Fire bending is probably okay as well. So I'd say theoretically she could. And in this world, I don't think there's a default reason why someone would be an only one element bender the way most people in Avatar are. What do you all think about this?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really established like the alchemical elements as being like an extremely meaningful force in this world. It's all kind of just physics. So yeah, I agree with you that other than like Earth being the most physically difficult to bend, I don't know why someone would be bend one element and not another, other than just focusing on one. Like, we know that Nia can do some ice magic, but she probably doesn't understand that on a on a molecular level well enough to realize that she could similarly change air pressure.
Yeah, and I think it is fair that people could have their preferences or their what's it called? What they're most experienced in, what they're most skilled at. But I don't think it would be like an inherent limit the way it is in Avatar.
But if the characters were put into Avatar,
ooh, that's a good question. In the YouTube chat, Renault's talking might be airbending. I mean,
technically it is, yeah.
That's probably true, because he's no longer he doesn't have a face basically, so he is using magic to make the air, the sound waves occur. So I think you're right about that.
Yeah, technically Renault is an airbender, unfortunately.
It would be interesting to put all our characters into the Last Airbender world. Chad also points out that Regan is a knife bender.
Yeah, if there's an element, Regan's element is knife.
Well, that is, I mean, so advanced earth bending is metal bending, so...
That's true. I like the idea of Yelloween not having any bending ability, but really wishing he could.
Yeah.
And sort of doing everything else as compensating for the fact that he can't bend anything.
I was imagining Yelloween leading a movement of bending folks, and then having a like late blooming bending ability and having to like hide it. And be like,
Uh-oh.
The YouTube chat points out, going into the world of Avatar, people being transported to a fantasy realm. I mean, it's already happened once.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Portal Fantasy Inception, where they just keep moving around from from fantasy world to fantasy world.
Yeah, I was going to say that could be a fun story, but I feel like someone has done that already.
Probably.
Um,
Not to say we would never do that either.
right.
wait, teleporting between like different. I mean,
Well, not existing properties.
I know that sounds like a show that I had.
Oh
to
yeah,
record
well,
lines
yes.
for.
Yes, there is that.
The chat points out interesting parallels between the elves and the Fire Nation. I think the one thing about that is the the uncle, is it Uncle Eero? He's in the Fire Nation, and he's genuinely such a good dude that I don't know if we could find the exact parallel in the elves. I mean, I guess Halloween is deep down a good dude, but it's not exactly the same character arc.
I mean, that would be like Prince Zuko.
Yeah, that's true.
Not quite lining up, but it would similar.
I like thinking about that. That's fun to think about. And any listeners, if you have your own thoughts on this, please write us in with that as well. And with that, we're getting towards the end of our questions. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to discuss? We had a question about why Gwen and Arlene haven't named the baby. Which I think is an interesting question. And it may be not necessarily spoilery, but it may be something that will end up being addressed at some point in the plot, but I don't want to promise anything.
Yeah, I also think, like, again, this also ties back to the problem we always have of real world time between episodes is so much longer than in world time between episodes. Like, in world time, they've only kind of had this baby for, like, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks. So it's not totally crazy to me that they would still refer to it as, like, the child or whatever. But I think, it's like, I think they're probably starting to get attached enough to it that they're gonna need to name it. That's my gut.
That's probably true. And just cause the baby can be a tie-in for those of you watching on the live stream, you see the cool new artwork which we have representing this chapter. This is John Flanagan again, our official artist, made this poster for our patrons. So if you want to get in on posters in the future, consider checking out our Patreon. John did a really cool job with this artwork. For those of you listening to the audio version, it features Nelson holding said baby with the horses from the horse race and the nightmare demon in the background behind, and it's a very cool looking piece of art.
Yeah, this one's so cool, and I love that it's got, like, the horse race incorporated and the rock climbing incorporated, and it's just super cool.
Yeah. The YouTube chat is still discussing Avatar: The Last Airbender, which I'm very happy with. Billy's basically Sokka. Yeah, I can see that.
I gotta watch this show one of these days, huh?
Oh, you really do.
Yeah.
Every time I see a GIF or a meme of the uncle online, I really just want to rewatch it.
Uh-huh.
Because he's he fills me with joy. He's the
Okay,
best.
how many episodes is it? How long are the episodes?
They're short episodes. I believe they're 30-minute or 22-minute episodes.
Uh-huh.
And I think
Yeah.
there were 3 seasons.
There were 3 seasons, yes.
3 seasons.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's for me when I was watching it and I was getting used to watching like animated shows, which usually tended to be you know, anime. These don't really have much like filler, I would say.
Uh-huh.
Most of it is like actually character building. And
Okay.
stuff along the
Yeah,
way.
because I do remember rushing home from middle school to watch Dragon Ball Z to find that the episode was everybody
Yeah.
powering up for the entire episode.
Everyone screaming for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not this. Like I think I was watching Naruto at the time because I was like, "What's this show? I see it all over the internet. Let me see what's going on." Yeah. Chad is saying around 60 episodes, 22
Okay.
minutes.
All right. I know I got to get around to it. There's a lot of good TV is the trouble.
There is a lot of good TV. This is true.
There is, I mean, they make some pop culture references such as the boulder is conflicted about hitting a little girl, which is just very much The Rock.
I don't know if I caught that. Like the first time
the
through.
boulder is no longer conflicted.
No, it's good. You should watch it. The
Okay.
YouTube chat all agrees you should watch it.
Okay.
And with that, I think it's time to about wrap up. The chat is pointing out that there's some pretty messed up immediate genocide in that series.
Okay.
Still a kid show.
Okay.
They make it work.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Okay, so I have homework now. Cool. Great. I need to watch a TV show and I need to make a Spotify playlist.
I mean, we all know we do these live streams just to give you more work because you don't do
Yeah.
enough yet. I mean, really, you're kind of a slacker here.
Yeah, I know.
I'm kidding. Christian does absolutely everything.
I don't do everything.
With that though, I think that's about it for the Ask the Ones and Future Nerd for Chapter 6. Thank you everyone for joining us. Greg and Christian, thank you for hanging out and chatting. I should let everyone know we were expecting a few more of the cast today, but unfortunately a lot of people are feeling under the weather, so everyone, I hope you feel better. Shannon is one of the people who was feeling under the weather, but she wanted us to shout out, she has a film called 3 Birds, which is making its world and New York City premiere this Wednesday at 8:15. So if you're in New York, go check it out. I could put
It's a short. It's a part of it's going to be part of a block of shorts at the Big Apple Film Festival. I gave Shannon some notes on the script as she was working on it, and Paul, who plays Nelson, cut it. So if you're around, we're super excited for, really proud of her for her first film premiere, and if you're around, you might want to check.
Yeah, I'll put. She gave us a link. I'm going to put the link in the YouTube chat. I think that's something I'm allowed to do. But yeah, so best of luck to Shannon on the debut, and I hope you feel better. And
and that link will also be in when this goes up on the podcast feed, all cleaned up and stuff. The link will be in. Oh well, I guess. This episode is probably going up after that, unfortunately. But yeah, in any case, congratulations to Shannon.
Yeah, Christian, do you know if there will be any way to watch it on the internet for people not local?
That's a good question. I will ask Shannon, and if there is, then I will definitely put that in the show.
Great. So we'll update on that. For you all here, any shout outs you want to make? Any sign offs?
No. I mean, left trigger, right trigger. And if you were a fan of, it's the video game podcast I do. And then if you were a fan of Full Metal Bazinga, stay tuned.
Oh no.
Oh, is there
Um,
news?
Oh no.
Not yet, but something is coming.
Oh boy.
We're working on a spiritual successor. So
Um, would you like to explain what is Full Metal Bazinga to those who don't know what it is we're talking about?
I forgot the pitch that we had at like PodCon, but it is encapsulated. It is now done. I believe it was 30 or 32 episodes in total. Christian did like as mentioned before, did a voice for it. It is where it is a watch along podcast for the final season of The Big Bang Theory, a show none of us have watched nor want to, that develops a metafiction and turns into like its own fiction, drama, existential horror.
Yeah, like the moment that this went from like it was fun to like when I first started listening and it was like, oh, I'm just like hearing my friends rag on a not great TV show and it was like fun to listen to, you know. And at a certain point it turned a corner where it was like, oh no, this is legitimately effective as horror. And that was
Yeah,
like an impressive turn for it.
Production wise, we would watch the episode and then go hit record on a at home in front of a microphone. But yeah, I think around the Thanksgiving episode is when it starts to really seep in there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Strongly recommend that everyone go check out Full Metal Bazinga. Check out Left Trigger, Right Trigger. Christian,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to give a quick shout out. A couple of weeks ago, Christian and I had a booth at the Podtails podcast convention in Cambridge, and it was a lot of fun. It was really awesome. We got to meet a bunch of fans, and that was very cool. So thank you to everyone who we chatted with at Podtails.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who stopped by. That was great. And shout out to Jeff and Alexander from In Greater Boston of put together. Is it Greater? I feel like I've been corrected on the name of the show.
I always do this. I always call it In Greater Boston, but I think that's wrong. I think it's just Greater Boston.
Okay.
But
well,
they did an
shout
amazing
out
job.
Yeah, this is the first year of the convention, and you would never know it. Like it was things that I didn't realize were sorely missing from other conventions I've been to were just like there without you having to ask, like people going around with granola bars and stuff, which was so well.
Yeah, it was very, very cool. The chat asks for Full Metal Bazinga. Do you need to watch Big Bang Theory as you listen?
No, we do that for you.
Yeah, absolutely not, actually.
In fact, please don't. Oh, see, okay, so I'm not just a total ding dong. Okay, so In Greater Boston is their Twitter handle, but the show is Greater Boston. So I'm not.
That explains it.
Their Tumblr is Greater Blogston, which is very good.
Regardless of their name, they put on an incredible convention.
And a great podcast.
Yes, and a great podcast. And we met a lot of really cool podcasters as well, so that was very cool. And if no one has anything else, I think it's about that time for us to be signing out. So thank you everyone in the chat for joining us. Thank you Christian and Greg for being here. And yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks
Bye.
for running this. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.